Do you ever feel the chilling breath upon your neck when no one is near? Or see a fleeting shadow at the edge of your vision, a phantom whisper of something unfulfilled? What if the echoes of past wrongs didn't just fade, but intensified, curdling into a potent, malevolent force, seeking its own brutal justice? You might believe the darkness behind your peripheral sight is merely an absence of light, but some corners of the world confirm it is a waiting presence, an invisible eye, watching from the deepest recesses of memory and sin. A presence that sighs like a cold draft through an empty room, carrying the murmur of a long-forgotten name. An accusation meant only for you. For in the forgotten, stone-clad halls of Crestwood Academy, where budding dreams were crushed beneath the heel of callous indifference, a shadow such as this did not merely lurk. It awoke, demanding audience with the guilty. Six months had passed since the day Elara Vance's final breath became a chilling whisper within the gray stone walls of Crestwood Academy. Yet for those who survived the echo of her silence, time had ceased. An unspeakable burden lay heavy upon the hearts of the supposed friends. A quintet who had once styled themselves the paramount figures in the corridors that were once their domain. There was Marcus, the arrogant ringleader, his cruelty cloaked by a fatal charm. Julian, whose sharp eye and cutting wit fashioned their derisive pranks and digital malice. Serena, an ice maiden whose smile concealed a razor's edge and whose sin was profound apathy. Liam, the sullen observer and propagator of vicious rumors, whose silence now spoke volumes more than his words. And Chloe, whose complicity was a mantle woven from deep-seated insecurity and cruel, endorsing laughter. Now they were returned to those dormitories, the sprawling campus, a stone prison, each trapped within their own unique cell of guilt. Elara, the pale revenant of Crestwood Academy, a humiliating digital sabotage of her research presentation, transforming her sensitive work into a public joke. Now, every electronic device became a cold, malevolent portal. His laptop suffered bizarre chronic malfunctions. The screen would flicker with disjointed text, spectral characters that seemed to twist and break like Elara's broken phrases, whispering digital taunts. He heard murmurs emanating from unplugged speakers, faint whispers, as if a weak current strained to speak her name. Sleep offered no respite. His dreams were loop sequences of Elara's hacked screen, her face contorted in silent distress, his own mocking lines of code blinking relentlessly above her. He found short, corrupted video clips of Elara's humiliation mysteriously appearing in his private files, sometimes accompanied by a weak groan that seemed to emanate directly from his internal hard drive. When he browsed online, blurry faces, resembling Elara in old, discarded photographs, would momentarily flash at the edge of his peripheral vision, laughing cruelly before vanishing. His meticulous file hierarchy began to rearrange itself, folders vanishing, only to reappear containing a single time-stamped image of Elara's tear-streaked face. Julian, who once found power in the logic of the network, now realized every page he visited was a gateway through which Elara's despair could reach him. The spectral eyes staring at him through the digital keyhole of the virtual world. His intellect, his greatest weapon, was being systematically dismantled by the ghost's calculated use of his own principles. Serena, whose sin was the calculated cruelty of apathy and public endorsement of Elara's suffering, felt the retribution as a crushing physical coldness. The communal washrooms, once her domain of casual luxury, became a place of dread. The water, even at maximum heat, ran glacial, and she would sometimes catch a reddish-brown streak like diluted rust running from the shower head, before clearing instantly. The constant dripping from the faucet, even when tightly shut, became an unbearable rhythmic pulse, invading every moment of silence. The mirrors were breathing something thick and frigid, a condensation of profound despair, and no amount of wool or heat could ever truly warm her again. Liam, who had maliciously spread the most vile and private rumors about Elara, found his voice bound in an invisible cuff. He began experiencing a strange, escalating vocal failure. Under any stress, his voice would lose its strength, coming out weak and fragmented.
The walls chuckle back with sardonic,
when he tried to speak loudly,
echoing
the sound would
titters.
emerge as a distortion. A song drifted off key, twisted into a screeching static. He would hear tiny, indistinct voices whispering his name from the smallest voids, cracks in the plaster, the recesses of his dresser drawer. Vague, static murmurs emanated from his old, disconnected radio, whispers that seemed to strain to form recognizable words of his past cruelties. He was plagued by fleeting images of a pale, whispering face, a shadow writhing in his periphery. His own voice began to change in unnerving ways. When attempting conversation, he would occasionally emit a sharp hiss or an incomprehensible, strangled whisper instead of speech.
Trace the hinge.
Even when alone, he felt unseen ears eavesdropping, waiting for him to air. His distorted words would sometimes be met with phantom responses, sardonic, echoing chuckles from the surrounding walls. He found himself involuntarily repeating old, unrelated slights, or, most terrifyingly, the exact hurtful phrases he had aimed at Elara, feeling as if someone else were controlling his mouth, manipulating his dialogue. His terror forced him into an almost complete self-imposed silence, a new voice in the symphony of increasing horror. As he became utterly dependent on the written word to communicate, a frustrating prison built on the ruin of his own verbal malice. Chloe, whose sin was the active participation of laughter and endorsement of cruelty, found her smile warped into something monstrous. She had reveled in the moments of Elara's humiliation, her laughter ringing out during the worst of the verbal attacks, to draw her gaze into an anxious scrutiny. Sometimes, she would catch a pale, pain-racked face darting across her peripheral vision. Faint, weak, but menacing moans would sweep past her, like a breath drawn from the very air. Chloe's smile, once her mark of unconcern, became a mask of profound desperation. A constant physical reminder of her guilt, the torment amplifying, until the sight of her own reflection was a source of unmitigated terror, a confirmation of the grotesque transformation taking place within her soul. Marcus, the chief instigator and primary author of the torment, found his vision occluded by an invisible veil of fear and sickness. His jests were the most vicious, his leadership the most destructive. He was plagued by a continuous, escalating visual distortion. Objects would flicker at the edge of his sight, shadows darting past, without source. He started seeing blurred shapes, sometimes resembling a staring face. A gaunt figure like Elara, dissolving the moment he turned to face it directly. His vision would blur strangely, as though an unseen curtain had been drawn across his eyes. When he tried to read, the words would swim on the page, vanishing and reappearing elsewhere. He began to see messages written on the walls in a mysterious black fluid. Cryptic warnings and threats that dissolved before he could confirm them. Dark shapes moved in his periphery, fleeting silhouettes moving too quickly, like a shadow of despair. He was also troubled by a strange, clinging odor of metallic dampness and decay. A stench that haunted him, regardless of his location. Marcus's reflections in the mirror became eerily distorted, his face appearing to melt or stretch, sometimes revealing the image of another person staring back at him from the glass. His torment climaxed in terrifying, hyper-realistic nightmares of Elara. Dreams where her face was contorted in agony, her eyes empty and streaming tears. He would jolt awake, screaming, drenched in cold sweat, only to find a singular, piercing sonic shriek, a sound that bypassed his ears and detonated inside his skull. The screen then flashed, displaying a final looping command in his own elegant handwriting. Delete yourself. The logic of his world failed. Julian did not move. He was found hours later, utterly unresponsive, his eyes wide and fixed upon the glowing screen. His mind having performed the ultimate, fatal self-purge. His essence was gone, his consciousness a blank slate, destroyed by the digital echo of his sin. Serena, trapped in the washroom, felt the ice water of the faucet turn instantly to an impossible, chilling steam, filling the space with a suffocating, dense fog that smelled intensely of honeysuckle and decay. The door, previously a barrier, now slammed shut and was bolted from the outside. She shivered uncontrollably as the dripping water intensified, growing faster, louder, until it became a maddening drumbeat. In the mirror, she saw no reflection, only the thick, coalescing shadow of Elara, cold and demanding. The fear of being trapped in that overwhelming cold, facing her own empty image, triggered a complete psychological paralysis. She was later found curled up on the cold, wet floor, covered in her own long hair, which had mysteriously detached itself, catatonic and unresponsive, her spirit having fled the physical terror of the space she once used to observe cruelty and comfort. Liam, overwhelmed by the echoing static and distorted whispers, suddenly felt a violent spasm grip his throat. He tried to scream, but only a desperate, silent gasp escaped. The voices in his mind, however, were not silent. They erupted into a cacophony of his own most vicious rumors, amplified 1,000 times, forcing his consciousness to bear the full weight of the pain his words had inflicted. He collapsed, clutching his head, his vocal cords permanently damaged by a phantom force. When discovered, he was muttering rapid-fire, nonsensical phrases, a babbling self-abnegation. His ability to form coherent, intentional speech irrevocably silenced by the ghost of his verbal singular, bright, accusatory light emerged. Elara's gaze. He was enveloped in the stench of decay and felt the overwhelming, heavy pressure of a hand on his shoulder. He saw Elara, finally, vividly, and impossibly real, standing directly before him. Her face a mask of silent sorrow and infinite judgment. The ghost did not physically harm him. It simply held him there, forcing him to witness the truth of his own depravity through her eyes. His vision, his command over his world failed completely. He dropped to his knees, his body racked with deep, gasping sobs. And then he began to whisper a confession to the empty space, detailing every cruel joke, every moment of pleasure he derived from her pain. Each word a spike, driven into his own soul. He was found hours later by the staff, a broken figure, still murmuring Elara's name. His spirit utterly extinguished, his mind lost to a profound, permanent delusion, consumed by the spectral gaze he had brought upon himself. The cleanup at Crestwood was swift and clinical. The official report cited a rare, stress-induced mass psychotic break among the students. A convenient narrative of shared madness. But the staff whispered about room 312, and the local police noted the chilling precision of the breakdowns. Each catastrophe a bespoke torture, perfectly fitted to the victim's sin. The true lesson is this: guilt is not merely a feeling. It is an accrued debt, an atmospheric presence that clings to the spaces and the minds of the culpable. The vengeance of Elara Vance was not physical. It was a triumph of psychological physics, where the soul's disintegration was the required payment. Do you ever feel that darkness behind your peripheral vision is not a simple absence of light, but a presence waiting? Have you ever witnessed an injustice and simply stood by, offering your silence as consent? Be warned, for the specters of the past do not forget, and the walls, it is said, always remember.